Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Titanic, 1997, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. Some films capture a moment in history. Others capture emotion. Titanic does both, weaving an epic love story into one of the most infamous tragedies the world has ever known. It is a film that doesn't just take you back in time, but immerses you in a world of luxury, romance, fate, and the unthinkable disaster that changed lives forever. The moment the movie begins, you are not just watching history. You are living it. Directed by James Cameron, Titanic is more than just a love story. It is a spectacle, a technical achievement, and an emotional masterpiece that has stood the test of time. It is a film that defied expectations, breaking box office records and earning its place as one of the greatest movies ever made. Audiences around the world became entranced by the ill-fated voyage of the RMS Titanic, a ship believed to be unsinkable, yet destined for one of the most devastating maritime disasters in history. At its core, it is a love story between two souls from opposite worlds, finding each other in the grandeur of the ship, only to face an unimaginable fate. The film follows Jack Dawson, a free-spirited artist with nothing but a sketchbook and dreams of a brighter future, and Rose DeWitt Bukater, a young woman trapped in the suffocating expectations of high society. Jack wins a ticket aboard the Titanic through a game of chance, never knowing that this one moment of luck will lead him to the love of his life. Rose, engaged to the wealthy but cruel Cal Hockley, boards the ship with the weight of obligation on her shoulders, believing her life has already been decided for her. When Jack and Rose meet, their connection is immediate and electric. He introduces her to a world outside of wealth and expectations, a world of passion, freedom, and the belief that life is meant to be lived on one's own terms. Their love story unfolds against the breathtaking backdrop of the Titanic itself, a marvel of engineering, elegance, and excess. Every hallway, every grand staircase, every glittering chandelier serves as a reminder that this ship was built as a floating palace. The film transports the audience into a time of luxury and class divisions, where the upper and lower decks were two different worlds, separated by wealth and privilege. But beneath the beauty of the ship lies the inevitable reality that will soon unfold. The romance between Jack and Rose is not just about passion, it is about survival. As their love grows, so does the looming threat of disaster. Ice warnings are ignored. The ship sails forward at full speed, unaware that fate has already been sealed. When the Titanic collides with an iceberg, the tone of the film shifts from a dreamlike romance to a desperate fight for survival. Panic spreads, lifeboats are lowered, and chaos takes hold as passengers realize that the ship, once thought to be indestructible, is sinking beneath their feet. The final hour of the film is a breathtaking and devastating sequence of human resilience, sacrifice, and heartbreak. The unsinkable is sinking, and as the water rises, so do the stakes. Jack and Rose fight against time, the freezing ocean, and the harsh reality that not everyone will survive. The scenes of passengers clinging to hope, musicians playing until the very end, and lifeboats drifting away with empty seats are haunting and unforgettable. The climax of the film is one of the most emotional moments in cinema history. As Jack and Rose find themselves in the icy waters of the Atlantic, it is no longer just about their love, it is about letting go. It is about choices, sacrifice, and the devastating cost of tragedy. Jack ensures Rose's survival, but at the cost of his own life. As she floats beneath the starry sky, promising never to let go, the film cements itself as a story not just about love, but about the endurance of memory, the cruelty of fate, and the strength to move forward even when everything is lost. Titanic is a film filled with unforgettable moments. The sweeping music of My Heart Will Go On, the iconic I'm the King of the World scene, the heart-wrenching goodbyes between families, the quiet dignity of those who accept their fate, all of these details make the movie an experience rather than just a story. It is a film that leaves its mark, no matter how many times it is watched. Even after decades, Titanic continues to be celebrated for its breathtaking cinematography, groundbreaking special effects, and emotional storytelling. It is a film that brings people to tears, no matter how many times they have seen it. It is a love story, a tragedy, and a cinematic achievement all in one. As the credits roll and the echoes of the past fade, one thing remains clear. Titanic is not just a movie, it is an experience, one that will be remembered for generations to come. The ocean stretches endlessly, deep and dark, hiding secrets beneath its waves. A robotic submersible glides through the water, its lights piercing the gloom, illuminating the wreckage of what was once the grandest ship in history. The remains of the Titanic lie still, frozen in time at the bottom of the Atlantic. The past is buried here, but some stories refuse to be forgotten. A team of treasure hunters, led by Brock Lovett, explores the wreck, searching for a legendary diamond known as the heart of the ocean. They have spent years chasing this priceless jewel, believing it to be hidden somewhere within the ship's remains. As the robotic camera scans through the debris, it finds something unexpected, a safe, perfectly preserved despite decades underwater. With mounting anticipation, they bring it to the surface and pry it open. Inside, there are papers, old and worn, but no diamond. Then, they uncover a sketch, an exquisite drawing of a woman wearing nothing but the heart of the ocean. The date on the paper reads April 14, 1912, the night before the Titanic sank. A team of treasure hunters, led by Brock Lovett, explores the wreck, searching for a legendary diamond known as the heart of the ocean. They have spent years chasing this priceless jewel, believing it to be hidden somewhere within the ship's remains. As the robotic camera scans through the debris, it finds something unexpected, a safe, perfectly preserved despite decades underwater. With mounting anticipation, they bring it to the surface and pry it open. Inside, there are papers, old and worn, but no diamond. Then, they uncover a sketch, an exquisite drawing of a woman wearing nothing but the heart of the ocean. The date on the paper reads April 14, 1912, the night before the Titanic sank. Far away, an elderly woman watches the news. Her name is Rose, and the image on the screen takes her back to a time long buried in her memories. She makes a call, and soon, she is on a helicopter, flying over the ocean, returning to the place where her life changed forever. When she arrives on the research ship, she steps carefully among the modern technology, untouched by time yet carrying within her the weight of history. She looks at the image they found, and with a quiet, knowing voice, she tells them, "The woman in the picture is me." And so, the past comes rushing back, not through cold artifacts or sunken ruins, but through the memories of a woman who lived it. The Titanic set sail from Southampton, the largest and most magnificent ship the world has ever seen. A floating palace, filled with the richest passengers of high society, where every staircase shines, every chandelier sparkles, and every deck is lined with those who believe they are on a journey to greatness. Among them is Rose DeWitt Bukater, a young woman trapped in a life she does not want. She stands at the railing, the wind whipping through her hair, looking out at the ocean, longing for escape. She is engaged to Cal Hockley, a wealthy and controlling man, who sees her as nothing more than a prize, an extension of his own power. Rose's mother, Ruth, reminds her that this marriage is the only way to secure their family's future. Everything has already been decided for her. Meanwhile, in a small, dimly lit pub, two men sit at a table, watching cards being dealt. Jack Dawson, an artist with nothing to his name but his talent and a sense of adventure, plays a game of poker that will change his life. With the final card turned, he wins not just money, but 2 tickets to board the Titanic. He and his best friend, Fabrizio, race to the dock, barely making it onto the ship before it departs. Their excitement is boundless. They are heading to America, to freedom, to the possibility of a new beginning. The ship is a world divided. The upper decks are a realm of wealth and refinement, where first-class passengers dine on exquisite meals, dressed in the finest clothes, engaging in conversations about business and social status. Below, in third class, life is simple but filled with joy. There is music, dancing, laughter, and the sense that, despite having little, they are alive. Jack embraces this, sketching in his notebook, capturing the faces and stories around him, always moving, always watching. Their paths cross one evening when Jack sees Rose standing at the back of the ship, staring down at the black water below. She is on the edge, quite literally, trapped in a life she does not want, convinced that the only way out is to let go. Jack steps forward, speaking gently, pulling her back, reminding her that life is meant to be lived. He holds out his hand, and in that moment, something shifts. She takes it. What follows is an unlikely connection, one that defies the rigid rules of society. Rose invites Jack to dine with the elite, and in return, Jack brings her to a world she has never known. They sneak away to third class, where music fills the air, where people dance with abandon, where for the first time in her life, Rose feels free. She spins, laughing, her heart pounding, as Jack watches her, knowing that in this moment she is no longer pretending to be someone else. But the world they live in does not allow such things to last. Cal watches from the shadows, his jealousy and rage growing. He sees Jack as nothing more than a stain on their perfect image, a nuisance to be dealt with. Rose is reminded over and over that she has a duty, a role to play, that love is a foolish fantasy. The pressure mounts, and she begins to waver. One night, she seeks out Jack, asking him to draw her. It is not just an act of art but an act of trust, of vulnerability. She removes the heavy jewelry, the layers of wealth and expectation, and in that moment she is not a debutante, not a bride-to-be, she is just herself. Jack sketches her, every stroke of charcoal capturing more than just her image, but her soul. As the night continues, they run through the ship, chased by men who would rather see Jack disappear. They hide, they laugh, and they find themselves in the cargo hold, where an old car sits untouched. In the quiet of that space, away from the eyes of the world, they share a moment that is theirs alone. It is love, pure and unguarded, the kind that neither of them had planned for, but neither of them can deny. Above them, the ocean stretches out endlessly, cold and waiting. The ship sails forward, its lights glowing against the dark water, unaware that an iceberg looms in the distance. The lookouts scan the horizon, but it is too late. The alarm rings out. The crew scrambles. The Titanic is moving too fast, and there is no time to turn. The collision is not immediate. It is almost silent at first, a scraping sound, a shudder through the hull. Passengers feel a tremor, a pause in the music, a ripple in their conversation. But below, in the belly of the ship, water rushes in, filling compartments that were never meant to be breached. The Titanic, the unsinkable ship, has met its fate. As Jack and Rose emerge from their stolen moment, they sense something is wrong. People whisper, crew members move with urgency, but the truth is not yet spoken. Cal sees them together and, in his fury, frames Jack for theft, having him arrested and locked away. Rose is pulled back into her world, trapped once more. And then, the realization sets in. The ship is sinking. Not in theory, not in rumor, but in reality. The water is rising, and there are not enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The perfect order of society begins to crumble. Fear takes hold. Rose runs, pushing through the chaos, searching for Jack. The ship tilts, the hallways flood, and the world as they know it begins to slip away. In the distance, the cold ocean waits, dark and merciless, ready to claim them all. The halls that once shone with grandeur now echo with the sound of rushing water. The Titanic, a floating palace that had once promised dreams of the future, is now sinking into the darkness of the Atlantic. The luxury and laughter of mere hours ago have been replaced with confusion, fear, and the unbearable weight of realization. The ship that was deemed unsinkable is going down, and not everyone will make it out alive. Rose fights her way through the chaos, desperate to find Jack. Her once pristine gown is soaked, her breath coming in short gasps as she pushes past panicked passengers. People run in all directions, some in search of loved ones, some in blind desperation, and some still refusing to believe that their world is ending. The ship creaks and groans, its steel body struggling against the force of the sea. Jack is locked in a small room, his hands bound as icy water seeps in through the floor. He calls out, but no one comes. The world outside is focused on saving itself, and he is forgotten. He tries to force the door open, his muscles straining, but the lock does not budge. Then, just as hope begins to slip, the door bursts open, and there she is, Rose, breathless and soaked, an axe in her hands. Their eyes meet, and in that moment, nothing else matters. She swings the axe, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. She misses. The blade crashes against the floor, the cold metal slipping from her grip. Jack steadies her, their fingers brushing for the briefest second. She tries again, and this time the chains snap. He is free. They run together, weaving through the rising water, dodging panicked passengers and collapsing ceilings. Around them, the ship tilts further, sending chandeliers swinging and furniture crashing against the walls. The grand staircase, once a place of elegance, is now submerged in shadow. Above them, lifeboats are being lowered into the ocean, but there are not enough. Women and children are ushered forward, while men are told to step back. Cal, watching from a distance, grabs a crying child and uses the moment to secure himself a seat in one of the lifeboats. He looks back at Rose, knowing she is slipping away from him forever, but his life matters more to him than anything else. Rose is urged to get into a lifeboat. The officer at the helm tells her it is her only chance. Jack tells her to go, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Their eyes lock, and for a moment she hesitates. The boat begins to lower. He watches her from above, his face unreadable, but inside, his heart is breaking. This is goodbye. But then, she moves. Without thinking, without hesitation, Rose leaps from the lifeboat back onto the ship, running straight into Jack's arms. He holds her, his voice cracking as he asks, "Why did you do that?" And she simply answers, "You jump, I jump." They are together now, no matter what comes next. The Titanic tilts even further, sending people sliding across the deck. The screams are deafening. The band, which had been playing in an effort to keep people calm, finally stops. The musicians exchange glances, knowing that this is the end. One of them nods, and then, softly, they begin again. Their music drifts through the chaos, their final act of grace in the face of disaster. Passengers cling to whatever they can as the ship lifts itself into the air. The stern rises, pointing toward the sky, while the bow is swallowed by the sea. People jump, their bodies disappearing into the freezing blackness below. The last remaining lights flicker, casting eerie shadows across the panicked faces of those still on board. Jack and Rose hold onto the railing, their fingers laced together. The ship gives one final shudder, and then, with a groan that seems almost like a cry, it snaps in two. The front half vanishes beneath the surface, pulling passengers down with it. The back half lingers for a moment before it too is dragged down, the last remnants of the Titanic disappearing forever. Then, silence. Jack and Rose break through the surface, gasping for air. Around them, the ocean is filled with people, all struggling to stay afloat, all calling for help. The lifeboats have drifted away, and there is nothing but the endless, merciless cold. Jack pulls Rose toward a floating piece of debris, lifting her onto it. He tries to climb up as well, but the board threatens to tip over. He stops. He knows there is only room for one. Shivering, barely able to speak, he takes her hand. He tells her to hold on, to never let go, to survive. His voice is firm, though his body trembles from the cold. She nods, her lips blue, her tears mixing with the sea. One by one, the voices around them fade. The desperate cries turn into whispers, and then nothing. The ocean has taken them all. Jack's hand in hers loosens. His eyes, still filled with love, begin to close. His breathing slows. Rose whispers his name, but he does not answer. The sky above them is endless, filled with stars. The world is still. She touches his face, her voice shaking as she promises she will never let go. And then, with a final look, she releases his hand, watching as he slips beneath the waves, lost to the ocean forever. The lifeboats return, but it is too late for most. Rose forces herself to move, to live, to fulfill the promise she made. She reaches for a whistle and blows as hard as she can, her voice too weak to call for help. The rescuers hear her. She is pulled from the water, wrapped in a blanket, surrounded by survivors, yet feeling utterly alone. On board the Carpathia, the ship that saved them, she stands among the others, her eyes hollow. She watches as Cal searches the faces of the rescued, looking for her. She turns away, hiding beneath the blanket, choosing in that moment to disappear. As they dock in New York, a crew member asks for her name. She pauses, then whispers, "Rose Dawson." She is no longer the woman she once was. She has left that life behind. The story fades, and the present returns. The old Rose finishes speaking, the memories of the past lingering in the air. The treasure hunters, once so eager to find the heart of the ocean, now sit in silence, realizing that they had been searching for the wrong thing all along. That night, Rose walks alone to the edge of the ship. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out the necklace, the heart of the ocean, the very thing they had spent years looking for. She holds it for a moment, feeling its weight, remembering everything it symbolizes. Then, with a quiet smile, she releases it. The diamond falls, disappearing into the depths of the Atlantic, returning to where it belongs. Later, as she sleeps, a vision takes shape. She is young again, standing at the grand staircase of the Titanic. Jack is there, waiting, his hand extended. Around them, the passengers who were lost that night stand together, watching, smiling. She steps forward, taking his hand, and as they embrace, the ship is alive once more, filled with light and laughter. The story of the Titanic is one of tragedy, but for Rose, it is also one of love, of survival, of a life lived to the fullest. The past is gone, but the memory remains, and as the stars twinkle above the ocean, the echoes of history still whisper beneath the waves. Some films create characters that are forgotten as soon as the credits roll. Others bring to life figures so vivid, so deeply human, that they feel as real as the world outside the screen. Titanic is one of those films. It is not just a story about a sinking ship. It is a story about the people on board, about love and loss, about privilege and survival, about those who fought against fate and those who surrendered to it. Each character carries the weight of their choices, and through them, the tragedy becomes more than history. It becomes personal. Jack Dawson steps onto the Titanic with nothing but a lucky hand in a poker game and a spirit that refuses to be tamed. He is a drifter, an artist, a man with no home but the world itself. He speaks with the ease of someone who has seen life at its most unpredictable, someone who understands that fate is just another name for chance. He does not belong to the wealthy elite, nor does he resent them. He simply exists outside of their world, free in a way they will never be. What makes Jack unforgettable is not just his charm or his talent but his unwavering belief in living life fully. He sees beauty in everything, the curve of a hand, the shifting light on the ocean, the way laughter transforms a moment. He teaches Rose to see the world through his eyes, to embrace the unknown, to trust her instincts. In doing so, he gives her something she has never had before: freedom. Yet Jack is not reckless. He understands the risks of the world he lives in. He knows that Titanic is more than just a ship. It is a symbol of the divides in society, a floating city where wealth determines survival. But when disaster strikes, Jack does not hesitate. He fights, not for himself, but for Rose. He never panics, never turns his back on her. Even in the final moments, when the cold of the ocean grips his body, he smiles at her, his last words not of fear but of hope. Rose DeWitt Bukater begins the film as someone trapped. She is engaged to a man she does not love, bound to a future she did not choose. On the surface, she is everything a proper young woman of high society should be: graceful, obedient, poised. But beneath that exterior, there is something restless, something desperate. She is drowning long before Titanic ever hits the iceberg. Jack awakens something in her, not just love, but self-awareness. He shows her that she is more than what others expect her to be. He teaches her to let go of fear, to embrace her own desires. And yet, what makes Rose compelling is that she is not weak. Even before she meets Jack, there is fire in her. She resists Cal's control, challenges the rules placed upon her, yearns for something more. Jack does not save her. He simply reminds her that she can save herself. When the ship begins to sink, Rose's transformation is complete. She is no longer afraid of what people think. She fights her way through the chaos, rescues Jack, and chooses her own fate. She could have left on a lifeboat, but she jumps back onto the ship, refusing to let fear dictate her choices any longer. And when Jack is gone, she carries him with her, honoring his memory by living a life he would have wanted for her. Cal Hockley represents everything Titanic was built to uphold: wealth, power, entitlement. He believes that money can buy him anything, including love, respect, and survival. From the moment he appears, he radiates control. His affection for Rose is not based on love but on possession. To him, she is not a partner but a prize. Cal is not a man who fights fairly. When he senses that he is losing Rose, he does not attempt to understand her. Instead, he tightens his grip, growing more violent, more desperate. His cruelty is not just toward her, it extends to Jack, to the passengers beneath him, to anyone he sees as beneath his status. When the ship begins to sink, his true nature is revealed. He shoves others aside to save himself, lying, manipulating, ensuring that he escapes while thousands are left behind. Yet even in his survival, he is lost. Rose chooses to disappear, to let him believe she drowned. In the end, all his wealth, all his status, means nothing. He may have lived through the disaster, but he lost everything that made him feel powerful. Molly Brown, known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, is a force of nature. She is one of the few wealthy passengers who does not see herself as superior to those around her. She has earned her fortune, but she has not forgotten where she came from. She embraces Jack, recognizing his spirit, his worth, something the rest of the first-class passengers refuse to see. During the sinking, she is one of the few who demands action, urging the lifeboats to go back for survivors, standing up against the fear and selfishness of those around her. Her presence in the film is brief but unforgettable. She is a reminder that kindness and courage do not belong to one class of people. They belong to those who choose to act. Ruth DeWitt Bukater is a woman of cold calculation. She is not heartless, but she is hardened by the world she was raised in. To her, survival is not about lifeboats or disasters, it is about money. She pushes Rose toward Cal, not out of love, but out of necessity. Their wealth is dwindling, and this marriage is the only way to secure their place in society. She sees emotions as weaknesses, believing that happiness is a luxury they can no longer afford. Yet when the ship begins to sink, her carefully constructed world crumbles. She sits in the lifeboat, watching helplessly as the Titanic disappears beneath the waves, knowing that no amount of status can protect her from the reality of loss. Her fate after that night is unknown, but one thing is clear: she will never have control over Rose again. Captain Edward Smith is a man of experience, respected by all who sail under him. But as the Titanic moves through the Atlantic, he faces a choice: slow down and risk arriving late, or push forward at full speed, trusting in the ship's strength. He chooses speed, not out of arrogance, but out of pressure. The world expects Titanic to break records, to prove itself. When disaster strikes, Smith does not run. He does not attempt to save himself. He stands in the wheelhouse, facing the inevitable. He understands that this is his responsibility, and he does not turn away. His fate is sealed with the ship, a captain going down with his crew. The musicians who play as the ship sinks are among the most haunting figures in the film. They could have run, could have fought for space in the lifeboats, but instead, they choose to bring comfort in the only way they know how. As the ship tilts, as the screams fill the air, they play on, their music a final offering of peace in a night of terror. Their last song echoes through the chaos, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is beauty. The passengers in third class are the forgotten ones. Trapped below decks, locked behind gates as the water rises, they are given no chance to save themselves. Families huddle together, whispering words of comfort as they wait for the inevitable. Mothers tuck their children into bed, telling them stories as the water creeps under the door. They are the ones who had the least, and they are the ones who lost the most. Each character in Titanic represents more than just themselves. They represent the different faces of humanity, the brave, the selfish, the loving, the cruel. Some fight, some flee, some accept their fate with quiet dignity. And in the end, the story is not just about a ship that sank. It is about the lives that were aboard, the choices they made, the legacy they left behind. Rose survives, not just for herself, but for Jack, for all those who did not make it. She carries their memory with her, proving that even in the face of tragedy, life goes on. And as she closes her eyes, dreaming of a time long gone, the Titanic lives again, its hulls filled with light, its passengers whole once more, waiting for the ones they loved to return. Some movies are made in studios with green screens and computer effects. Others demand something more, something real. Titanic is one of those films. It was not just a production but an obsession, a journey that pushed actors, crew, and even the director to their limits. What happened behind the scenes was almost as dramatic as what played out on screen. The challenges, the accidents, the strange coincidences, each one became a part of the film's legendary status. James Cameron, the man behind the film, was not content with just telling a love story on a sinking ship. He wanted audiences to feel like they were truly there. To achieve this, he took a deep dive into history, both figuratively and literally. Before filming even began, he led multiple expeditions to the real wreckage of the Titanic, descending in a submersible over 2 miles below the ocean's surface. He spent hours in the depths, studying every detail of the ship's remains. The challenges, the accidents, the strange coincidences, each one became a part of the film's legendary status. James Cameron, the man behind the film, was not content with just telling a love story on a sinking ship. He wanted audiences to feel like they were truly there. To achieve this, he took a deep dive into history, both figuratively and literally. Before filming even began, he led multiple expeditions to the real wreckage of the Titanic, descending in a submersible over 2 miles below the ocean's surface. He spent hours in the depths, studying every detail of the ship's remains. The haunting images of the wreck, with its grand staircase covered in silt, its broken hull lost in darkness, became a major influence on how the film was shot. No director had ever taken such extreme measures just for research. The attention to detail did not stop there. Instead of relying solely on sets or computer-generated imagery, Cameron built a nearly full-scale replica of the Titanic. A massive structure was constructed in Mexico, complete with working lifeboats, grand staircases, and corridors designed to flood with thousands of gallons of water. Every railing, every window, every plate in the dining room was modeled after real artifacts from the original ship. The chandeliers were made by the same company that had built the ones for the real Titanic. Even the carpets were custom-made to match the designs from 1912. The film's budget soared as Cameron refused to cut corners. At one point, it became the most expensive movie ever made, costing over $200 million. Studio executives panicked, questioning whether audiences would even be interested in a period drama with a known tragic ending. Some feared the production was cursed, much like the ship itself. The shoot was grueling, testing the endurance of everyone involved. The water scenes were some of the most challenging. The actors spent hours submerged in giant tanks, often shivering from the cold. Kate Winslet, who played Rose, became so exhausted that she nearly quit. She suffered bruises, a chipped elbow, and even pneumonia. She later admitted that she was one of the few cast members who did not want to work with Cameron again, calling him demanding and intense. But despite her struggles, she delivered one of the most iconic performances in cinematic history. Leonardo DiCaprio, who played Jack, also found himself struggling. He was not fond of the freezing water, nor was he thrilled about the amount of time spent in wet clothes. He also initially resisted saying one of the film's most famous lines, "I'm the king of the world." Cameron had to push him to deliver the line with the enthusiasm needed to make it memorable. In the end, it became one of the most quoted moments in film history. But perhaps the strangest event during production happened on one fateful night when the cast and crew gathered for a meal. What started as a simple wrap party turned into something out of a mystery novel. Someone had spiked the seafood chowder with PCP, a powerful hallucinogenic drug. Within minutes, people began experiencing bizarre effects. Some laughed uncontrollably, others panicked. A few started hallucinating. Cameron himself was among those affected. At first, people thought it was food poisoning, but when someone suggested the soup had been tampered with, panic spread. The set had to be shut down as multiple people were rushed to the hospital. The culprit was never caught, but the incident became one of the most bizarre stories in Hollywood history. Another strange fact about the movie lies in the fate of the characters. Many of the background actors were based on real Titanic passengers, and their stories were recreated with incredible accuracy. One particularly eerie moment in the film shows an elderly couple lying together in bed as water rushes into their cabin. This was based on the true story of Isidore and Ida Strauss, an elderly couple who owned Macy's department store. When the ship was sinking, Ida refused to leave her husband's side, saying, "Where you go, I go." They were last seen holding hands as the sea swallowed the ship. One of the most heartbreaking details involved the musicians who played as the Titanic went down. Their scene in the film was hauntingly real. 8 men who continued to play until the very end, their final song believed to be "Nearer, My God, to Thee." In real life, their bodies were found with their instruments still strapped to their backs. Cameron made sure to honor them in the film, ensuring their sacrifice was remembered. Even small details were carefully considered. The scene where Jack teaches Rose how to spit off the side of the ship? Completely improvised. The moment where Rose flips Cal the middle finger during a dinner scene? Also unscripted. The hand scene sketching Rose in the nude? That was not Leonardo DiCaprio, it was James Cameron himself. Every single drawing in Jack's sketchbook was done by Cameron, who had a background in art before becoming a filmmaker. The level of historical accuracy extended to the ship's final moments. Cameron worked closely with historians and marine experts to depict the sinking as accurately as possible. The way the ship broke apart, the way passengers struggled in the freezing water, even the way lifeboats hesitated to return, all of it was based on survivor testimonies. He even hired a lip-reading expert to determine what the crew and passengers might have been saying in silent archival footage of the real Titanic's departure. But there was one detail that was intentionally left inaccurate. In the film, the sky above the sinking ship is filled with stars, a breathtaking moment as Jack and Rose float in the freezing water. But after Titanic was released, one particular viewer pointed out an error: astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. He noticed that the star pattern in the sky was incorrect for the North Atlantic in April 1912. When Cameron re-released the film in 2012 for the 100th anniversary of the Titanic sinking, he corrected the sky, ensuring that the stars matched exactly what they would have looked like that night. Titanic's impact did not end with the film's release. The set where it was filmed is now a major tourist attraction. The film sparked renewed interest in the real Titanic, leading to further expeditions and discoveries. And the song "My Heart Will Go On," originally dismissed by Cameron as unnecessary, became one of the most successful movie songs of all time, forever tied to the film's emotional legacy. Titanic was expected to fail. Studio executives feared it would be a disaster, comparing it to Waterworld, another expensive film that had underperformed. Even the cast had doubts. Leonardo DiCaprio thought it might be just another period drama. Kate Winslet was convinced it would be a nightmare. But James Cameron knew. He knew he was creating something that would not just be a film, but an experience. When Titanic finally premiered, it defied every expectation. It became the highest-grossing film of all time, a record it held for over a decade. It won 11 Academy Awards, tying with Ben-Hur for the most Oscar wins ever. It became a global phenomenon, with fans seeing it multiple times in theaters. But beyond the awards, beyond the records, Titanic became something more. It became a piece of history in itself, a movie that transported audiences not just into the past, but into the hearts of those who lived it. It was a film about love, loss, survival, and fate. When Titanic finally premiered, it defied every expectation. It became the highest-grossing film of all time, a record it held for over a decade. It won 11 Academy Awards, tying with Ben-Hur for the most Oscar wins ever. It became a global phenomenon, with fans seeing it multiple times in theaters. But beyond the awards, beyond the records, Titanic became something more. It became a piece of history in itself, a movie that transported audiences not just into the past, but into the hearts of those who lived it. It was a film about love, loss, survival, and fate. It was a reminder that no matter how much time passes, some stories never fade. And as long as there are stars in the sky and waves on the ocean, the story of Titanic, and the film that captured it, will live on. Some films entertain. Others stay with you long after the credits roll. Titanic is one of those rare movies that does both. It is more than a romance, more than a historical drama, more than an epic spectacle of filmmaking. It is a story that grips the heart, immerses the senses, and leaves audiences in awe. Every frame, every moment, every character choice is deliberate, crafted with an intensity that demands to be felt. The events that unfold throughout the film are not just storytelling devices. They are emotional anchors, each contributing to the weight and depth of the experience. The opening moments of Titanic do not begin in 1912 but in the present, with an old woman recalling memories long buried beneath the ocean. This decision, simple as it seems, transforms the entire film. It shifts the perspective, making the audience aware from the very start that this is not just a tragedy of the past but a living memory, a story still held in someone's heart. The ship is not just a wreck at the bottom of the sea, it is a place frozen in time, waiting for the past to be uncovered. The contrast between the cold, lifeless remains of the Titanic and the vibrant, golden glow of the ship in Rose's recollection creates an immediate emotional pull. It is not just a film about history but about memory, about the power of the past to shape the present. The first half of the film is built on contrasts, light and dark, wealth and poverty, freedom and confinement. Titanic itself is presented as a microcosm of society, divided by class, where the upper decks are filled with polished grandeur and the lower decks are bursting with energy and life. The upper-class passengers dine in elegant rooms, speaking of business and legacy, while the third-class passengers dance below, laughing without constraint. These scenes serve a dual purpose. They illustrate the divisions of the world that existed in 1912, but they also set the stakes for what is to come. When the ship begins to sink, these divisions become more than social structures. They become a matter of life and death. Jack and Rose's romance is more than just a love story. It is an act of rebellion, a breaking of barriers. Rose is not simply drawn to Jack because he is charming. He represents the freedom she has never had. Every moment they share is infused with the theme of choice. Rose can continue down the path laid out for her, secure but trapped, or she can choose uncertainty, danger, and love. Jack teaches her that life is not meant to be controlled, that true living is found in the moments that take the breath away. Their time together is not just about passion, it is about transformation. One of the most significant moments in the film comes when Rose stands at the stern of the ship, contemplating ending her life. The Titanic is her prison, an extension of the societal chains that have bound her since birth. Her decision to step over the railing is a desperate grasp at control, an attempt to reclaim her own fate before it is decided for her. Jack's intervention is not just about saving her life, it is about reminding her that life itself is worth fighting for. The symbolism is clear. Standing at the edge of the ship, she is also standing at the edge of her old life, teetering between the world she has always known and the unknown possibilities ahead. As the film progresses, every scene carries a sense of inevitability. The audience knows the iceberg is coming. They know what will happen. Yet, this knowledge does not diminish the tension, it amplifies it. Every joyful moment, every laugh, every dance in third class is a reminder of what is at stake. The decision to linger on these moments, to let them breathe, makes the eventual disaster all the more devastating. When the Titanic finally strikes the iceberg, the shift is not immediate. The initial impact is almost silent, a quiet scraping against the ship's hull. There is no explosion, no dramatic jolt, just a shudder that ripples through the decks. The delayed realization, the disbelief among passengers, the uncertainty among the crew, it mirrors the real-life accounts of that night. The slow unfolding of tragedy is what makes it so terrifying. By the time panic sets in, it is already too late. One of the most haunting sequences in the film is not the ship breaking apart but the quiet moments in between. The musicians who continue to play as chaos unfolds around them, the elderly couple holding each other in bed as water rushes into their room, the mother in third class telling her children a bedtime story, knowing they will never wake up. These moments are what give the film its emotional weight. They remind the audience that this was not just a disaster, not just history, but a collection of human lives, each one filled with dreams, love, and fear. The cinematography in these sequences is masterful. As the ship tilts and the halls flood, the camera shifts with it, disorienting the viewer, making them feel the helplessness of those trapped inside. The lighting changes from the warm glow of the ship's chandeliers to the cold, unforgiving darkness of the ocean. The sound design, too, plays a crucial role. Water rushing, metal groaning, the distant screams fading into silence. Every detail is designed to immerse the audience in the sheer horror of the event. Jack and Rose's final moments together are not just about love but about survival. When Jack places Rose on the floating debris, he knows there is no room for both of them. Some have debated whether there was enough space, whether he could have climbed on as well. But the point is not the physics of the scene. The point is that Jack would never have risked Rose's life for his own. His love for her is selfless. His last words are not of regret or fear but of hope, urging her to live, to survive, to never let go. The final shot of Jack disappearing beneath the waves is more than just a moment of loss. It is a passing of the torch. He has given Rose the strength to carry on, to live a life beyond this tragedy. When she lets go of his hand, it is not just an act of necessity, it is a choice to move forward. The film's conclusion, with an elderly Rose standing at the edge of the ship, is one of quiet resolution. She carries the heart of the ocean, the very thing that so many have searched for, the artifact that symbolizes wealth and loss, and she lets it slip into the sea. This moment is not just about returning the diamond, it is about closure, about laying the past to rest. Rose has lived a full life, one that Jack would have been proud of. She has kept her promise. And then, in the final moments, the dreamlike sequence of Rose returning to the Titanic, stepping into the grand staircase where Jack waits for her, surrounded by those who were lost. That moment is not just an ending. And then, in the final moments, the dreamlike sequence of Rose returning to the Titanic, stepping into the grand staircase where Jack waits for her, surrounded by those who were lost. That moment is not just an ending. It is a farewell, a tribute, a final embrace of a love that transcended time. Titanic is a film that lingers. It is a spectacle, a love story, a tragedy, and a triumph of filmmaking. It is a reminder that history is not just facts and dates but human lives, stories that deserve to be told, emotions that still resonate. It is a film that does not just ask to be watched but to be felt. And long after the credits roll, long after the final frame fades to black, the echoes of its story remain, carried like whispers on the waves of the ocean. Some movies are made with scripts, cameras, and actors performing on carefully controlled sets. Others demand something more. Something real, something monumental, something that pushes the very limits of what filmmaking can achieve. Titanic is one of those films. It wasn't just a production. It was an odyssey. Every detail, every shot, every decision made by James Cameron and his crew was designed to create a film that didn't just tell a story but made audiences feel like they had stepped aboard the doomed ship itself. The journey to bring Titanic to life was as massive as the ship it sought to recreate. James Cameron, known for his obsession with realism and his relentless perfectionism, didn't just want to tell the story of Titanic. He wanted to make audiences experience it. His first step wasn't writing a script or assembling a cast. It was something much more ambitious. Before even filming a single frame, he embarked on multiple deep-sea dives to the wreck of the Titanic itself. Descending over 2 miles beneath the surface of the North Atlantic in a tiny submersible, Cameron and his team captured haunting footage of the real shipwreck. Its rust-covered remains resting silently in the darkness. This was not just for research. It was to set the tone for the entire film. He wanted to see the Titanic with his own eyes, to understand the weight of history, to ensure that every moment of his film carried the gravity and authenticity of the real event. But how do you bring a ship that sank over 80 years ago back to life? The answer: you build it. Almost in its entirety. The production team constructed a nearly full-scale replica of the Titanic at a special studio in Baja, Mexico. The set was colossal, stretching across an enormous water tank capable of holding millions of gallons of water. This tank would become the Atlantic, a controlled environment where they could film the ship sinking piece by piece, moment by moment, just as it had in 1912. Every detail of the ship's interior was painstakingly recreated. The grand staircase, the first-class dining hall, the lower decks, all of it was rebuilt to match the real Titanic as closely as possible. Cameron even had the carpets woven by the same company that had provided them for the actual ship. The chandeliers, the china, the furniture. It was all made to be historically accurate, down to the smallest detail. Nothing was left to chance. The film's budget soared. Titanic was the most expensive movie ever made at the time, costing over $200 million. Studio executives panicked, worried they had bet too much on a historical epic with an ending that everyone already knew. But Cameron refused to cut corners. Every shot had to be perfect. Every moment had to be immersive. He was known for pushing his actors and crew to the absolute limit. The water sequences were among the most grueling. Many of the sinking scenes were filmed in freezing water, with actors spending hours submerged. Kate Winslet, who played Rose, nearly quit the film after suffering from hypothermia and bruising from repeatedly being thrown into the water. Leonardo DiCaprio, who played Jack, hated the cold, often complaining about how long he had to stay wet. But Cameron pushed them forward, reminding them that the audience had to believe it. If they didn't feel the cold, if they didn't feel the exhaustion, neither would the viewers. One of the most famous moments in the film, when Jack teaches Rose how to spit off the side of the ship, was completely improvised. Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio had such natural chemistry that they often played off each other between takes, and Cameron decided to keep the scene in the final cut. Their dynamic on screen was as effortless as it was behind the scenes, making Jack and Rose one of the most beloved movie couples of all time. But not all moments on set were as light-hearted. One of the strangest incidents in Hollywood history occurred during the filming of Titanic. One night, after a long day of shooting, the cast and crew gathered for a meal. They were served a batch of seafood chowder, but something was very wrong. Within minutes, people began experiencing bizarre symptoms. Some were laughing uncontrollably, others were hallucinating, and some felt dizzy and panicked. It was later discovered that the soup had been laced with PCP, a powerful hallucinogen. Cameron, along with dozens of cast and crew members, had to be rushed to the hospital. The culprit was never found, and the incident remains one of the most infamous mysteries in Hollywood. Throughout production, the commitment to realism was relentless. The film's special effects, while groundbreaking, were used sparingly. Cameron wanted as much of the film to be practical as possible. The ship breaking in half, the water rushing through the hallways, the lifeboats being lowered into the ocean. Much of it was done with real sets, real water, and real destruction. One of the most haunting and heartbreaking moments in the film, the elderly couple lying in bed as the water rises around them, was based on real-life Titanic passengers Isidore and Ida Strauss. The wealthy couple had refused to be separated, even as the ship was going down. Ida was offered a seat on a lifeboat but refused to leave her husband's side. Instead, they lay down in their cabin, holding each other until the very end. Cameron ensured that their story, like so many others, was honored in the film. Another iconic moment, the band playing as the ship sinks, was also based on true events. The musicians of the Titanic continued to play until the very last moments, hoping to calm the panicked passengers. The film captures this with heartbreaking accuracy. The final song they played, "Nearer, My God, to Thee," became a lasting symbol of grace in the face of disaster. When Titanic was finally completed, it ran over 3 hours long. Some feared that audiences wouldn't sit through such a lengthy film, but Cameron refused to cut major scenes. He knew that every moment mattered, that the emotional weight of the story required time to unfold. He was right. When the film was released, audiences were not just willing to sit through 3 hours, they were willing to come back and watch it again. And again. Titanic became the highest-grossing film of all time, a record it held for over a decade. It won 11 Academy Awards, tying with Ben-Hur for the most Oscar wins ever. It became more than just a movie, it became a cultural phenomenon. People memorized the lines, reenacted scenes, and carried the story of Jack and Rose in their hearts long after leaving the theater. Even the song that became synonymous with the film, "My Heart Will Go On," almost didn't happen. Despite the film's overwhelming success, debates and discussions about its accuracy and creative choices have continued for years. One of the most famous arguments revolves around Jack's fate. Could he have fit on the floating debris with Rose? Did he have to die? The debate became so widespread that even Cameron himself eventually conducted experiments to prove that Jack's sacrifice was necessary for the realism of the film. But in the end, the discussion itself is proof of the film's impact. Over 2 decades later, people are still talking about it, still analyzing it, still feeling the weight of that moment. Titanic was not just a film. It was an experience, a work of art, a testament to what cinema can achieve when passion and dedication collide. It demanded everything from its cast and crew, pushing them beyond their limits, creating something unforgettable in the process. And as long as films are made, as long as stories are told, Titanic will remain one of the greatest ever created. Not just for its breathtaking visuals, not just for its love story, not just for its tragic beauty, but for the sheer ambition and heart that brought it to life. The setting of Titanic is more than just a backdrop. It is a living, breathing presence in the film, shaping the story as much as the characters themselves. The grandeur of the ship, the vastness of the ocean, the contrast between luxury and hardship, every visual detail adds layers of meaning, pulling the audience into a world that feels real, immersive, and unforgettable. From the first glimpse of the Titanic rising from the ocean floor to its final descent into darkness, the setting tells a story of its own, echoing themes of fate, power, and loss. The film opens in modern times, with a deep-sea expedition exploring the wreck of the Titanic. This choice immediately establishes the ship as more than just history. It is a ghost, a memory buried beneath the waves, waiting to be unearthed. The wreckage is haunting, silent, untouched by time, and the dim, murky light of the ocean gives it an eerie quality. The contrast between these cold, decayed remains and the golden, vibrant Titanic of 1912 is striking. As Rose's memory transports the audience back in time, the ship is reborn, glowing in the sunlight, a symbol of ambition and human achievement. The Titanic itself is depicted as a floating palace, a masterpiece of engineering, designed to be the most luxurious vessel ever built. Its first-class decks are bathed in warm light, reflecting the wealth and excess of its passengers. Every hallway, every room is grand, lined with rich wood, ornate chandeliers, and intricate carvings. The grand staircase, one of the most famous locations in the film, is a centerpiece of elegance, where the elite gather in their finest attire. This staircase is not just a physical place, it becomes a symbol of status, a place where Rose is expected to be the perfect socialite, where Jack can only exist as an outsider. Below, in the third-class quarters, the atmosphere is completely different. The rooms are small, cramped, simple, but filled with life. The lighting here is dimmer, the walls less polished, yet there is a warmth that is absent from the cold formality of the upper decks. The energy is raw, unfiltered, with people laughing, dancing, and celebrating the freedom of a new beginning. It is here that Rose finds joy for the first time, stepping away from the expectations placed upon her and embracing the spontaneity and passion of the people around her. The cinematography in these contrasting settings is intentional, reinforcing the divide between wealth and struggle, between privilege and survival. When Rose moves between these two worlds, the lighting changes subtly, soft and controlled in first class, rougher and more natural in third. The camera lingers on details that highlight this division, from the polished silverware of fine dining to the worn wooden tables of steerage. But as the film progresses, as Jack and Rose's love story unfolds, these differences begin to blur. The warmth of third class becomes more inviting, the cold perfection of first class begins to feel suffocating, then comes the iceberg. The moment of collision is quiet, almost gentle, but the impact is immediate. The mood shifts. The ship, which once felt like an invincible city on the sea, becomes a prison. The hallways that once sparkled with light grow darker, filled with shadows and uncertainty. The grand staircase, which once stood as a symbol of power and grace, begins to flood, swallowed by the rising water. The cinematography reflects this transformation. The camera angles become more tilted, mimicking the ship's slow descent. Movements become frantic, lighting shifts from warm to harsh, the elegant setting turning into a nightmare. As panic spreads, the ocean becomes an ever-present force, creeping into every corner of the ship, reminding the audience that nature, not human achievement, will have the final say. The water is not just a setting, it is an antagonist, an unstoppable force that swallows everything in its path. The cinematography captures this with chilling precision. The camera follows water rushing through corridors, filling rooms that moments before had been filled with laughter. The sound of the ocean grows louder, drowning out voices, overpowering even the screams. The lifeboats, once overlooked as mere accessories to the grand ship, now become the most valuable objects on board. The way they are filmed reinforces their significance. The contrast between those who manage to board them and those left behind is stark. The passengers in the lifeboats are framed with space around them, floating in open water, while those still on the Titanic are packed tightly, surrounded by steel and rising waves. This visual storytelling heightens the emotional weight of the moment, making every second of separation feel more unbearable. When the Titanic finally breaks apart, the chaos is captured with breathtaking intensity. The camera shakes, the angles are tilted, making it feel as though the audience is inside the disaster. The ship, once upright and strong, now tilts at impossible angles, sending people falling, sliding, clinging to whatever they can. The cinematography ensures that the destruction is not just spectacle, it is deeply personal. It does not just show the ship sinking, it shows the individual faces of those experiencing it, their fear, their desperation. And then, silence. The ship disappears beneath the waves, and what was once a world of movement and noise becomes eerily still. The ocean, which had been a setting throughout the film, now becomes a vast, empty void. The stars above, the endless darkness of the water below, it is a breathtaking image, both beautiful and horrifying. The contrast between the chaos of the sinking and the stillness that follows is one of the most powerful cinematic choices in the film. It allows the audience to feel the weight of what has just happened. In the final moments, as Rose floats in the freezing water, the setting is stripped down to its simplest elements. The vastness of the ocean, the cold glow of the moon, the sound of gentle waves, it is isolation in its purest form. The camera focuses on the small details that make the moment so personal. The way Jack's frozen hand slips away, the way Rose's breath forms small clouds in the air, the way her voice trembles as she makes her promise. These details make the scene unforgettable. The film ends where it began, in the modern world, with the wreck of the Titanic resting on the ocean floor. But now, it is not just a relic of history. It is a place of memories, of lives once lived. Rose stands at the edge of the research vessel, holding the heart of the ocean, the diamond that symbolizes everything she has kept hidden for decades. As she releases it into the sea, the setting once again becomes more than just a backdrop. It is an extension of her journey. The diamond does not belong in a museum or in a vault. It belongs here, with the ship, with the past. And then, in the film's final moments, the setting transforms once more. The Titanic is no longer a wreck, it is whole again, glowing with light, filled with people. The grand staircase stands as it once did, untouched by time. The music swells, and there is Jack, waiting. This dreamlike sequence is not just an ending, it is a return. A farewell to a life that was never truly lost. Titanic setting is not just where the story takes place, it is an active part of the storytelling. It changes, it reacts, it mirrors the emotions of the characters. The grandeur of the ship makes its fate all the more tragic. The vastness of the ocean makes the loss feel even more profound. The way the camera moves, the way light shifts, the way every detail is framed, it all serves to pull the audience deeper into the experience. This is why Titanic does not feel like just a film. It feels like stepping into history, into love, into tragedy. It is a world so fully realized, so vividly captured, that it stays with you long after the final scene fades into darkness. Some films come together with ease. Others are forged through relentless effort, unforeseen challenges, and the sheer willpower of those involved. Titanic was the latter. It was a film so ambitious, so massive in scale, that it pushed everyone, actors, crew, even the director, to their absolute limits. Every moment on set was a battle between creativity and chaos, between perfection and practicality. And yet, despite everything, what emerged was nothing short of cinematic history. James Cameron did not just direct Titanic, he commanded it like a captain steering a ship through a storm. Known for his intense, almost obsessive dedication to realism, he demanded more from his cast and crew than most directors ever would. He wasn't interested in easy solutions. He wanted authenticity, even if it meant pushing people past their comfort zones. He built a world that wasn't just meant to be filmed but lived in. The most remarkable part of Titanic's production was the ship itself. Instead of relying entirely on computer-generated effects, Cameron oversaw the construction of a massive, nearly full-scale replica of the Titanic. Built in a specially designed water tank in Mexico, it was one of the most complex movie sets ever created. The ship was designed to be flooded, tilted, broken apart, all while the cameras rolled. Every room, every hallway, every staircase was carefully reconstructed using real artifacts, blueprints, and historical photographs. The goal was to transport audiences into the past, to make them feel as though they had truly stepped aboard the doomed ship. The cast had to fully immerse themselves in this world, and Cameron made sure of it. From the moment they arrived on set, they were expected to embrace the reality of their characters' lives. First-class actors dined in extravagant dining halls, their costumes fitted with the finest fabrics. Third-class actors were given rougher clothing, eating simpler meals, kept separate to maintain the illusion of social divide. Even the extras, many of whom had significant screen time, were given detailed backstories. They were not just passengers, they were real people with real lives, each one carrying a piece of history. Leonardo DiCaprio, who played Jack Dawson, was not initially thrilled about taking the role. He was already making a name for himself in Hollywood, but a massive romantic epic wasn't what he had planned. He was hesitant, unsure if it was the right move for his career. But Cameron saw something in him. The charisma, the natural energy, the ability to bring Jack to life in a way no one else could. When he finally agreed, He threw himself into the role, even sketching between takes, though his famous drawing of Rose was actually done by Cameron himself. Kate Winslet, cast as Rose, had the opposite reaction. She wanted the role so badly that she practically begged for it, calling Cameron repeatedly until he agreed to meet with her. She saw Rose as more than just a love interest. She was a woman breaking free from societal constraints, a character with depth and strength. But what she didn't anticipate was just how physically demanding the role would be. The water scenes were brutal. The sinking sequences were shot in enormous water tanks, where actors were submerged for hours at a time. The water was cold, far colder than Winslet had expected. She suffered multiple injuries, including a chipped elbow and a severe case of pneumonia. Unlike DiCaprio, who often wore a wetsuit beneath his costume to stay warm, Winslet refused. She wanted to feel what Rose would have felt. She later admitted that the experience was exhausting, but she never regretted it. The chemistry between Winslet and DiCaprio was effortless, but their friendship behind the scenes was even stronger. They played pranks on each other between takes, laughed during the most dramatic moments, and supported each other when the demands of the film became overwhelming. Winslet even revealed that she would flash DiCaprio to lighten the mood, especially during the more intense scenes. Their bond was so genuine that even decades later, they still speak about each other with deep affection. But not all moments on set were fun and games. One of the strangest incidents in Hollywood history took place during Titanic's production. Late one night, after filming had wrapped for the day, the cast and crew gathered for a meal. Seafood chowder was served, and within minutes, chaos erupted. People started laughing uncontrollably, hallucinating, feeling dizzy and disoriented. Some were giggling, others were panicking. It was later discovered that the soup had been laced with PCP, a powerful hallucinogen. Even Cameron himself was affected, though he quickly forced himself to vomit to lessen the drug's effects. The production was shut down for the night, with dozens of crew members being rushed to the hospital. The culprit was never caught, and to this day, it remains one of the strangest mysteries in filmmaking. Beyond the bizarre, there were the logistical nightmares. Filming the sinking itself was a monumental challenge. Cameron wanted the audience to feel every moment, the desperation, the chaos, the raw human emotion. To achieve this, he relied on practical effects whenever possible. The massive replica of the Titanic was designed to tilt, break apart, and submerge into the water. Hundreds of stunt performers were used, many of whom were harnessed to cables to simulate the terror of people being thrown from the ship. The scale of destruction was so immense that even the crew sometimes struggled to keep track of everything. And then there were the small, unplanned moments that made their way into the final film. The famous line, "I'm the king of the world," wasn't in the original script. Cameron told DiCaprio to improvise something as Jack stood on the bow of the ship. At first, DiCaprio hesitated, feeling embarrassed, but Cameron insisted. The moment became one of the most iconic in movie history. Another unforgettable scene, when Jack and Rose run through the ship's flooding hallways, was filmed using real water rushing into the set. The problem? Cameron miscalculated how much water would be needed. When the flood began, it was far more powerful than expected, nearly knocking Winslet and DiCaprio off their feet. The sheer force of it created a genuine sense of urgency in their performances, and rather than reset the scene, Cameron kept it in the final cut. The dedication to historical accuracy was intense. Even the stars in the sky were considered. After the film's release, astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson pointed out that the constellations in the final scene were incorrect for the North Atlantic in April 1912. Cameron, known for his perfectionism, took this to heart. When Titanic was re-released in 2012, he corrected the sky to match the real star alignment from that night. The emotional weight of Titanic extended beyond the set. The film's extras, many of whom played passengers who did not survive, often found themselves deeply affected by their roles. Some had family members who had been on the real Titanic. Others became immersed in the tragedy, feeling a strange connection to the past. There were moments of silence on set, times when even the toughest crew members felt the gravity of what they were recreating. When Titanic finally premiered, it was expected to be a box office disaster. The budget was too high, the runtime too long, the ending too tragic. But Cameron knew what he had created. He famously told studio executives, "You either see this movie make a lot of money, or you see it sink. But either way, I'm going down with it." He was right. The film became the highest-grossing movie of all time, holding the record for over a decade. It won 11 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. It became more than just a film, it became a cultural phenomenon. People saw it multiple times, memorized the lines, fell in love with the characters. Behind the scenes, Titanic was a battle, against nature, against expectations, against the limitations of filmmaking itself. But in the end, it was all worth it. What James Cameron and his team created was not just a movie. It was an experience, a journey, a story that would be told for generations. And long after the cameras stopped rolling, long after the last set piece was dismantled, the legacy of Titanic remains, as unshakable as the ocean itself. Some films tell a story. Others make you feel something deeper, something that lingers long after the screen fades to black. Titanic is one of those films. It is not just about a shipwreck, nor is it just about a love story. It is a story about fate, about survival, about the divides that exist between people, and about the way love can transcend all of it. Every scene, every visual detail, every moment in the film is rich with meaning, woven together with themes that make Titanic more than just a tragic romance. It is a reflection of humanity itself, captured on the decks of a ship destined for disaster. The theme of class division is one of the most powerful forces in the film. Titanic, both the real ship and its cinematic recreation, was a world built on hierarchy. The wealthy passengers lived in luxury, dining on fine meals, walking through grand halls, and speaking of business, legacy, and social status. Everything about first class exuded power and privilege. The lower decks, by contrast, were filled with immigrants and working-class passengers, people chasing a dream, hoping that Titanic would be their passage to a better life. The film does not just show this contrast, it makes the audience feel it. When Jack first steps onto the ship, he is full of excitement. To him, Titanic is not just a ship, it is a symbol of possibility, a new beginning. He has nothing to his name but a third-class ticket won in a game of chance, yet he walks through the crowded steerage corridors with energy and wonder. Rose, by contrast, walks through the upper decks with quiet resentment. She is surrounded by luxury, draped in diamonds, but she feels suffocated, trapped. Titanic, to her, is not freedom. It is a cage, a vessel carrying her toward a future she does not want. The way the ship is filmed emphasizes this divide. The camera angles, the lighting, even the music shifts between these two worlds. First-class scenes are framed with elegance, the movement of the camera slow and controlled, reflecting the refined, rigid lives of the wealthy. Third-class scenes are full of energy, the camera handheld, the angles dynamic. The warmth of the steerage passengers, the dancing, the laughter, the uninhibited joy, stands in stark contrast to the quiet restraint of high society. Yet, when the iceberg strikes, these social divisions become more than just a matter of privilege, they become a matter of survival. The very structure of the ship, with third-class passengers locked behind gates, becomes a devastating metaphor. The wealthy are given seats on lifeboats first, while those below deck are left to fend for themselves. Some fight to break through, others accept their fate with quiet dignity, but in the end, the ship does not care about wealth. The ocean does not care. It swallows rich and poor alike, making all men equal in the face of death. The film's central romance is not just a love story, it is an act of rebellion against this system. Jack and Rose are drawn to each other not just because of attraction, but because they represent something the other longs for. Jack sees Rose as someone drowning in a world that does not allow her to truly live. Rose sees Jack as a symbol of everything she has been denied: freedom, adventure, passion. Their love is not just about romance. Their relationship is filled with symbols of transformation. The most obvious is Rose's journey, from a restrained, obedient young woman to someone who takes control of her own fate. When she meets Jack, she is dressed in elaborate restrictive gowns, her hair pinned in perfect curls, her voice careful and measured. By the end of the film, she is stripped of all of it. Her dress is soaked, heavy with water, slowing her down, forcing her to shed everything that once defined her. Her hair is wild, loose. Her voice is no longer hesitant, it is strong, desperate, fighting to survive. Water itself is one of the film's most haunting symbols. It is everywhere, a silent force waiting beneath them, creeping closer with every passing moment. At first, the ocean is beautiful, stretching endlessly in all directions, a symbol of freedom. Jack sees it this way, standing at the bow of the ship, arms outstretched, shouting that he is the king of the world. But when the iceberg strikes, the water transforms into something else entirely. It becomes a symbol of fate, of inevitability. It rushes through the hallways, dragging people under, filling the grand staircase, silencing the music. It is unstoppable, swallowing history itself. One of the film's most poignant moments is the heart of the ocean, the massive blue diamond that Cal gives to Rose. To him, it is a sign of ownership, a symbol of their engagement, of the wealth and power that he believes should keep her by his side. But to Rose, it is something entirely different. It is a reminder of everything she wants to escape, of the suffocating world she is desperate to leave behind. When she lets it slip into the sea at the end of the film, it is not just an act of letting go, it is a statement. The diamond, worth a fortune, holds no value to her anymore. She has lived her life on her own terms, without wealth, without status, and that is what matters. The ocean, which took so much from her, now takes this final piece of her past, pulling it back into the depths where it belongs. The film's ending, though ambiguous, carries the weight of memory, of time, of love that never fades. As Rose closes her eyes, she dreams, or perhaps something more. She returns to the Titanic, whole and shining, its halls filled with people once lost. Jack waits for her at the top of the grand staircase, and as they embrace, the ship comes alive again. This moment is rich with meaning. It is not just a reunion, it is a return to the moment where she truly became herself, where she found love, where she was reborn. Some see this as a representation of death, of Rose finally passing on, joining those she lost. Others see it as a dream, a final farewell. But no matter the interpretation, the meaning is clear. Love, memory, and the choices we make shape us long after the moment has passed. Music, too, plays a crucial role in reinforcing these themes. The score, composed by James Horner, is filled with swelling orchestral movements that capture both the grandeur of the ship and the depth of human emotion. The recurring motif of "My Heart Will Go On" is more than just a song, it is a promise. A promise that love endures, that life moves forward, that memories never truly fade. Even the smallest details carry significance. The clock in the grand staircase, frozen at the moment the ship went down, becomes a symbol of time stopping, of history frozen in tragedy. The violin that plays until the final moments reminds us that even in the face of disaster, there is dignity, beauty, and grace. Titanic is not just a film about a sinking ship. It is about the things that define us, our choices, our love, our will to survive. It is a story of how people respond when faced with the impossible, how fear and courage intertwine, how some choose selfishness while others choose sacrifice. And in the end, it is a reminder that history is not just about dates and facts, it is about the lives that were lived, the hearts that were broken, and the love that, even after everything, still remains. Some films are made to tell a story. Others are made to make history. Titanic is both. It is not just a film, it is a cinematic experience, a technical achievement that pushed the boundaries of filmmaking, a spectacle that remains one of the most immersive movies ever created. Every frame, every sound, every visual effect was designed to transport audiences back to 1912, to place them aboard the most famous ship in history, to make them feel the weight of its tragedy and the depth of its love story. It was an ambitious vision, one that required cutting-edge technology, groundbreaking cinematography, and relentless dedication. And it was all led by one man, James Cameron. Cameron is known for his meticulous attention to detail, his refusal to compromise, and his relentless pursuit of realism. When he set out to make Titanic, he did not just want to recreate history. He wanted to capture it, to make audiences feel like they were standing on the decks of the ship, hearing the crack of the iceberg, feeling the rush of freezing water. He approached the film not just as a director but as an explorer, a historian, and a storyteller determined to get everything right before filming even began. He embarked on multiple deep-sea expeditions to the real Titanic wreck. This was not just research, it was an obsession. He wanted to see it with his own eyes, to understand the scale, the decay, the haunting beauty of the ship resting on the ocean floor. He took cameras down into the abyss, capturing real footage of the wreck, which he would later incorporate into the film. These eerie, silent images of the Titanic's remains bookend the movie, grounding the film in reality before sweeping the audience into the past. To bring the ship back to life, Cameron and his team constructed a nearly full-scale replica. It was one of the largest movie sets ever built, stretching across an enormous water tank in Mexico. The Titanic's grand staircase, its dining halls, its lower decks, every detail was recreated with historical accuracy. The film's set designers consulted with Titanic experts, studied blueprints, and even used the same manufacturers who had built furniture and fixtures for the original ship. The result was breathtaking, an entire world rebuilt, only to be destroyed on screen. But a set alone was not enough. The sinking had to feel real. The destruction had to be visceral. Cameron insisted on practical effects wherever possible, meaning that much of what audiences see, the water rushing through hallways, the ship tilting at impossible angles, the decks splitting apart, was done with real, physical sets and large-scale mechanical effects. For the climactic sinking sequence, the massive replica ship was designed to tilt, flood, and break apart just as the real Titanic had. Hundreds of thousands of gallons of water were used, controlled by enormous pumps that could unleash waves on cue. Stunt performers were strapped into harnesses, flung across decks, and submerged in icy water. Every moment of chaos was carefully choreographed to make it feel as real as possible. One of the most innovative techniques used in Titanic was its seamless blend of practical and digital effects. The film was made at a time when CGI was still evolving, and Cameron knew that relying too heavily on digital effects would make the film feel artificial. Instead, he used CGI strategically, to extend the ship, to add background details, to enhance the crowd scenes. Many of the wide shots of Titanic sailing were created using a combination of miniature models and digital compositing. The result was stunning. Never once does the ship feel like a digital creation. It feels massive, tangible, alive. The film's cinematography played a crucial role in immersing the audience. The camera moves with purpose, shifting between intimate moments and grand spectacle. The love story between Jack and Rose is filmed with warmth, the lighting soft, the framing close, making their world feel personal, real. When they are together, the ship feels vast, full of possibility. When disaster strikes, the camera shifts, angles become tilted, movements become frantic, the once spacious Titanic now claustrophobic and collapsing. One of the most striking uses of cinematography is the way it mirrors history itself. As the ship tilts further into the water, the camera follows, forcing the audience to feel the disorientation of those on board. The once perfect symmetry of the Titanic is shattered. The halls that were once grand now flood with darkness. The world turns sideways, then upside down. The editing of Titanic is masterful. At over 3 hours long, the film could have felt slow, but instead, it moves with a perfect rhythm. The first half allows the audience to breathe, to explore the ship, to fall in love with Jack and Rose. The second half never lets up. The moment the iceberg hits, the tension tightens like a vice, with cross-cutting between the engine room, the captain's bridge, and the passengers as realization sets in. The editing ensures that every moment builds on the last, leading to a final act that is as heartbreaking as it is relentless. Sound design plays just as vital a role. The crack of the iceberg is not a sudden explosion. It is a deep, groaning tear, a slow, dreadful noise that signals the beginning of the end. The sound of water rushing into the ship grows louder as time runs out, drowning out screams, consuming everything. The orchestra, playing as the ship sinks, provides one of the most haunting moments in cinema. Their music is a final act of defiance, a quiet dignity in the face of horror. And then, when the Titanic is gone, the sound changes completely. Silence. Floating in the freezing Atlantic, the survivors are surrounded by nothingness. The absence of noise is chilling, a contrast to the chaos that came before. It is in this moment that the film delivers its most emotional punch: survival, loss, and the weight of history, all captured in silence. The film's musical score, composed by James Horner, elevates every moment. The music is sweeping, tragic, and unforgettable. The main theme, intertwined with the melody of My Heart Will Go On, carries the emotions of the film, becoming synonymous with the love story and the loss. Horner's score does not overpower. It enhances, weaving through the film like the ocean itself, sometimes gentle, sometimes devastating. When Titanic was finally completed, it was one of the most expensive films ever made. At $200 million, it was a gamble unlike anything Hollywood had seen before. Studio executives feared it would be a disaster. The production had gone over budget, the runtime was long, and it was a period drama with a tragic ending. Hardly the formula for a box office hit. But when the film was released, it defied every expectation. It became the highest-grossing movie of all time, a record it held for over a decade. Audiences saw it multiple times, drawn back to the emotional pull, the grandeur, the romance. It was not just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Critics praised its technical achievements, its storytelling, its emotional depth. It swept the Academy Awards, winning 11 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Cameron. It was a triumph not just of filmmaking, but of vision, of ambition, of believing that a film could be more than just entertainment, it could be an experience. Even decades later, Titanic remains one of the most beloved films ever made. It is a testament to what cinema can achieve when every element, visuals, sound, music, storytelling, is brought together in perfect harmony. Cameron once said, "Titanic was not just about making a movie. It was about making history." And in every frame, in every moment, that is exactly what he did. Some films create stars. Others turn actors into legends. Titanic did both. It was a film that not only captured the hearts of audiences but also elevated its cast to a level of fame few could have imagined. The performances were raw, emotional, and unforgettable, bringing to life a love story that felt as real as the historical tragedy unfolding around it. But what happened behind the scenes? How did the cast experience making one of the most grueling and ambitious films in history? And how did audiences react when Titanic finally hit the big screen? At the heart of Titanic is the love story between Jack Dawson and Rose DeWitt Bukater, brought to life by Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. Their chemistry is effortless, electric, and filled with the kind of magic that makes an on-screen romance feel real. But what many don't know is that DiCaprio almost didn't take the role at all. James Cameron had been searching for the perfect Jack, someone charismatic, full of energy, and capable of making the audience fall in love with him in just a few scenes. He met with multiple young actors, but no one quite had the effortless charm he was looking for. Then came Leonardo DiCaprio. DiCaprio was already on the rise in Hollywood, known for his talent in indie films and smaller roles, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to commit to a massive studio romance. Cameron recalled their first meeting, where DiCaprio showed up with a casual attitude, fully expecting to be offered the role without much effort. But when Cameron asked him to do a screen test with Kate Winslet, something changed. Cameron later revealed in an interview that DiCaprio had hesitated, saying, "Wait, you mean I have to read lines?" Cameron simply extended his hand and said, "Thanks for coming." It was a test. If DiCaprio wasn't willing to put in the work, the role would go to someone else. Seeing the opportunity slipping away, DiCaprio relented. The moment he read lines with Winslet, the chemistry was undeniable. Cameron knew he had found his Jack. Kate Winslet, on the other hand, fought for the role of Rose from the beginning. She knew the part was hers, calling Cameron repeatedly, even sending him a handwritten letter expressing why she was perfect for it. She later joked that she absolutely stalked James Cameron. But her persistence paid off. Winslet and DiCaprio's friendship on set was one of the highlights of the production. The two actors bonded instantly, often making each other laugh between takes. Winslet later revealed that she would sometimes flash DiCaprio during filming just to break the tension during emotional scenes. Even decades later, their friendship remained strong, with Winslet saying, "He's my closest male friend. We've grown up together." But making Titanic was far from glamorous. The production was grueling. Winslet suffered multiple injuries, including hypothermia from spending hours in freezing water. DiCaprio, who had never worked on a film of this scale, often grew frustrated with the intensity of the shoot. One of the biggest challenges was the water sequences. The sinking scenes required actors to be submerged in massive tanks of freezing water, sometimes for hours at a time. Winslet later admitted that she almost quit the film because of how physically exhausting it was. She bruised her elbow so badly that she couldn't move her arm for days. But Winslet wasn't the only one struggling. DiCaprio, who disliked the cold, often complained about having to film in wet clothes. In one scene, where Jack and Rose are running through a flooding hallway, the water was so powerful that Winslet was nearly swept away. Rather than cutting the take, Cameron kept the shot, adding to the film's authenticity. Cameron himself was known for his demanding directing style. He pushed his actors to their limits, often making them do multiple takes to get every detail perfect. Some cast and crew members later described the experience as both exhilarating and exhausting. One crew member even compared Cameron to the captain of the Titanic himself, saying he had a vision, and nothing was going to stop him. Not budget issues, not injuries, not exhaustion. But even with the challenges, the performances that emerged were nothing short of iconic. Billy Zane's portrayal of Cal Hockley, Rose's arrogant and controlling fiancé, was perfectly calculated. Zane later said that playing the villain was both fun and frustrating. Audiences despised his character so much that he would get booed in public after the film's release. Kathy Bates, who played the unsinkable Molly Brown, was one of the most beloved members of the cast. Her no-nonsense attitude and warmth made her a standout, and she later spoke about how she felt a deep emotional connection to the real-life Molly Brown, a woman who fought to help others during the sinking. The supporting cast, many of whom played real-life Titanic passengers, were also deeply invested in their roles. Some even researched their historical counterparts, reading survivor accounts and studying old photographs to ensure authenticity. Jonathan Hyde, who played J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of the White Star Line, was so committed to his role that he studied Ismay's mannerisms and speech patterns to capture his controversial persona. But how did audiences react when Titanic finally premiered? At first, many believed the film would fail. The budget had spiraled out of control, the production had been plagued with issues, and Hollywood insiders were skeptical that a 3-hour period drama with a known tragic ending could be a box office success. Studio executives were nervous, fearing they had invested millions in a disaster. Then, something incredible happened. When Titanic was released in December 1997, it became an instant phenomenon. Theaters were packed, with audiences watching the film multiple times. People sobbed openly in their seats. Viewers connected so deeply with Jack and Rose's love story that they refused to let it go. Critics praised the film for its stunning visuals, powerful performances, and emotional depth. Roger Ebert called it a magnificent motion picture and praised Cameron's ability to blend history with storytelling. Even skeptics who doubted the film's potential had to admit that Titanic was something special. And then there was the box office. Titanic did not just perform well, it shattered every record imaginable. It became the first film to cross the billion-dollar mark, a feat that had never been accomplished before. It remained the highest-grossing film of all time for over a decade, only surpassed by another James Cameron film, Avatar. The film's success wasn't limited to North America. Titanic became a global sensation, drawing audiences from every corner of the world. It was released in multiple languages, with some countries hosting screenings for months. The impact of Titanic went beyond the box office. It became a cultural moment, influencing fashion, music, and even travel. Cruises started offering Titanic-themed experiences. People quoted the film constantly. Lines like, "I'm the king of the world," and "You jump, I jump" became part of pop culture. The film went on to win 11 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for James Cameron. As he accepted his Oscar, Cameron famously declared, "I'm the king of the world," a nod to his own film that cemented its place in history. Even today, Titanic remains one of the most beloved films of all time. Audiences continue to revisit it, drawn to its timeless romance, breathtaking visuals, and emotional depth. Winslet and DiCaprio's performances still resonate, their chemistry still undeniable. The film's legacy endures, proving that some stories never fade. What makes Titanic so special is not just its technical brilliance or its record-breaking success, it is the way it makes people feel. The love, the loss, the tragedy, the hope, it all lingers long after the credits roll. It is a film that captures not just a historical moment, but something deeply human, and as long as movies exist, Titanic will remain a masterpiece, a film that, like the ship itself, was built to stand the test of time. Some films fade over time, lost in the ever-changing tides of cinema. Others remain, not just as stories but as experiences, as emotions, as echoes of something larger than life. Titanic is one of those films. It is not just a historical epic or a romance. It is a journey, one that takes its audience through grandeur and tragedy, love and loss, the highest points of human ambition and the deepest depths of human suffering. It is a film that does not just tell a story, it makes you feel like you lived it. From the moment the film begins, with the eerie images of the Titanic's wreckage resting silently on the ocean floor, there is a sense of history being unearthed. It is a ghost ship, frozen in time, waiting for its story to be told. And then, as Rose's memories bring the past to life, the Titanic is reborn, not as ruins but as a gleaming masterpiece of human achievement. The ship becomes a symbol of hope, of luxury, of the belief that anything is possible. And yet, beneath its elegance, beneath the laughter and music, the future is already written. The iceberg waits. The ocean is silent, knowing that its moment will come. The film's first half allows us to explore this world, to experience the Titanic in all its glory. We see the stark contrast between the rich and the poor, the rules of society that keep people in their assigned places, the invisible walls between first class and third. We meet Jack Dawson, a free spirit who has nothing but his dreams, and Rose DeWitt Bukater, a woman drowning in a world of wealth and expectation. Their love story is not just about passion. It is about freedom, about choice, about breaking away from the chains that society has placed on them. Jack shows Rose what it means to truly live, and for the first time, she sees the world through her own eyes, not through the ones that have always controlled her. Then comes the iceberg. The shift in tone is immediate. What was once a ship of dreams becomes a nightmare. The cinematography changes, the lighting turns colder, the music fades into tension. The Titanic is no longer a symbol of luxury. It is a trap, a slowly sinking prison where survival is dictated by class and chaos. The film does not just depict the sinking as an event, it makes you feel it. The sounds of metal twisting, of water rushing in, of desperate voices crying out into the night. The ship breaks apart piece by piece, its passengers forced to make impossible choices. Some fight, some flee, some accept their fate with quiet dignity. The grand staircase, once a place of elegance, is now submerged, lost forever. At the heart of it all is Jack and Rose. In a sea of panic, they hold on to each other. Jack does not panic, does not waver. His only concern is making sure Rose survives. When he places her on the floating debris and stays in the freezing water, it is not just about sacrifice. It is about ensuring that she gets the future he always wanted for her. His last words to her are not about himself, not about fear, but about life. "You must do me this honor. You must promise me that you'll survive, that you won't give up, no matter what happens." And she does. Rose survives, not just because of luck, but because of will. Because she chooses to fight. Because she chooses to honor Jack's memory by living. She lets him go, whispering the words that have now become legendary. "I'll never let go, Jack." She means it. Not in the literal sense, but in the way that matters. She carries him with her, in her choices, in her life, in the way she refuses to be the woman she was expected to be. The film's conclusion is as powerful as its beginning. Rose, now an old woman, returns to where it all began. The treasure hunters who searched for the heart of the ocean believed they were looking for a priceless diamond, but in reality, the real treasure was her story, her memories, the life she lived. She stands at the edge of the ship, holding the necklace that so many have sought after. And then, in a quiet, poetic moment, she releases it. It does not belong in a museum, in a vault, in the hands of someone who sees it only as wealth. It belongs to the ocean, to the past, to the story that it represents. Then, as she sleeps, we see a final image, one that is open to interpretation. She steps onto the Titanic once more, not as a wreck, but as it was in its prime, filled with light, with life, with those who were lost. Jack is there, waiting at the top of the grand staircase, reaching out for her. The ship comes alive again, not as a tragedy, but as a moment frozen in time, where love, memory, and eternity intertwine. Whether this is a dream, a vision, or something more is left to the audience. But what is certain is that the story has come full circle. Titanic is a film that is remembered not just for its breathtaking visuals, not just for its record-breaking success, but for the way it made people feel. It is a testament to storytelling at its finest, where every detail, every performance, every shot works together to create something unforgettable. It is a film about love, about survival, about how even in the face of tragedy, the human spirit endures. And its impact has never faded. From the moment it was released, audiences were drawn to its power. It became a global phenomenon, earning more than any film had before it, winning 11 Academy Awards, and leaving an imprint on cinema that can never be erased. Decades later, it remains just as moving, just as breathtaking, just as unforgettable as it was on the day it premiered. The legacy of Titanic is not just in its box office numbers or its accolades. It is in the people who continue to watch it, to feel it, to carry its story in their hearts. It is in the love for Jack and Rose, in the sorrow of their goodbye, in the way it reminds us of how fragile and beautiful life can be. It is in the way it captures something universal, the desire to love, to be free, to leave behind something meaningful. Some films entertain. Some films inspire. Titanic does both. It is a reminder that no matter how much time passes, some stories never fade. Some stories remain as powerful as the day they were first told. And if you love exploring films like this, if you want to dive deeper into the greatest stories ever told, then make sure to subscribe. There are so many more films to explore, so many more stories waiting to be uncovered. Because, as Titanic reminds us, some stories are meant to be remembered forever.